Okay, so as I say, this is one of my favorite shiurim because it allows us to view a story that is very familiar to us in a very different way by the time we're finished. The problem is on page 1, and it's a very deep problem, a very, very critical problem, raised by many commentaries, but the Ramban is the one that we're quoting. Ki yesh litmoa, one could wonder, achar she'omad Yosef b'Mitzrayim yomim rabim, after Yosef has been in Egypt already for a number of years, v'hayapakid v'nagid b'bayis shel sar gadol, and he's talking about Potiphar. He is living in Potiphar's house. It has been placed by Potiphar over all his household. Eich lo shalach kitav echad la'aviv lahodio ulanachamo. How is it possible that given the opportunity, because of his standing, that Yosef did not send at least one small written note somehow to let his father know what's going on? No communication whatsoever. Because Mitzrayim is a 6-day journey away from Canaan. And it would be appropriate, says the Ramban, even if it were a year journey, for Yosef to send word to his father and to be menachem him, to comfort him. So what we have to do is we have to put ourselves in Yosef's place, and we have to try to figure out why is there silence during the years when he could well have sent a message. So take a look at the second section on your page, the classical approach. First 2 sentences. Vayaker Yosef ezachav v'hem lo hikiru. All right, we're at the point now where the brothers have come down to Egypt, sent down by Yaakov, and they are recognized by Yosef. Yosef recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. Why not? Variety of possible reasons. He's older, he looks Egyptian, and who would possibly think that Yosef would be in this position giving out food to people from Paro? Makes no sense. V'hem lo hikiru, they don't recognize him. But now look at the second sentence. This is pivotal. Vayiskar Yosef es hachalomos asher cholam lohem. Yosef sees his brothers, and what does he remember? The dreams. What would you remember if you were Yosef and you were seeing your brothers for the first time? Well, I'd flash back on the scene at the pit, right? Makes no sense. Why is it that Yosef immediately thinks of his dreams? So the Ramban says the following. He quotes Rashi, and Rashi says that what Yosef realized was that his dreams had come true. That's Rashi's position. The Ramban says, Lefi dati hadavar behefech. The opposite is true, says the Ramban. What happened was Yosef, remembering his dreams, looks at the scene before him and says, this isn't it yet. All the people that have to be here are not here yet. Binyamin has to be here, and then my father has to come down. So the dreams are on the way towards being fulfilled, but they're not fulfilled. And he therefore sets out on a path of manipulating the brothers mercilessly, really manipulating them very, very harshly, because what does he do? He immediately calls them spies, tells them that they're not going to get any food. Then he gives them the food. Then he puts the money that paid for the food back in their satchels, so they'll find it and they'll say, oh, we can't go back. We stole the money. And finally, he puts Binyamin in the position of being the sole brother who will remain, because he hides a goblet in Yosef's, in Binyamin's satchel. So what you got is a manipulation of events by Yosef that, and every detail is very, very thought through. For example, when the brothers go back and recognize that they have the money that paid for the food, they are not willing to go back to Egypt. They're not willing to go back because they're afraid they're going to be thrown into jail as soon as he sees them. What Yaakov continues to say, no, you have to go down. He asked you to come back with Binyamin. We have no food. Finally, they go. As soon as they get to Egypt, what does Yosef do? He holds a party for them. He puts them in a banquet hall reserved for the royalty. They can't figure this out, right? They're off balance. Every single thing that he does puts them off balance as he's trying to make his dreams come true, says the Ramban. The second classical approach, which isn't on your sheets, is not that he wants to make his dreams come true, but that he wants to give his brothers the opportunity to do tshuva. Sorry, I haven't been looking on this side. All right? The opportunity to do tshuva. He wants them to have the opportunity to repent for what they did. The Rambam says that the true repentance, what's true repentance? Being put in the same situation you were in before where you sinned and choosing not to sin, right? So what is the end result of all the manipulations of Yosef? That his brother, his only full brother, the only other son of Rachel, is now being threatened with imprisonment. He says, the rest of you can go back home. And Yehuda stands up and says, we can't go. And finally, Yosef reveals himself. But the point is that he manipulates events so that true teshuvah can take place. There is no other scene that would be as comparable to the scene of his sale than the scene that he manipulates and allows to happen, or enables to happen. There's a problem, however, with both of these interpretations, the Ramban's interpretation and the other classical approach. What would you say the problem is? There you go. There you go. Right. Who appointed you chief cook and bottle washer, right? What? You see the dreams? Does a prophet make his prophecies come true? No. He interprets the dreams and then allows events to come. A prophet, a real Navi, will go and talk to the community and say, God's going to do X, Y, and Z, and you've got to do X, Y, ABC. But the point is, here, what he's doing is he's saying, I not only had the responsibility to dream these dreams, I had the responsibility to make them come true. It's my job. Or I have the responsibility to make my brothers do tshuva. Who gave you that responsibility?
Top of the page, the first question is, why did you never contact Jacob?
Right.
The bottom of the page is he's stabbing Jacob again.
Correct.
Where's Shimon?
Right. Right. You know, I hear you. And he's prolonging the time away.
I speculate as to whether he would have let the brothers go without Binyamin.
Uh-huh. In other words, if someone would not have stood up and said, we can't go, would he have allowed the brothers to go back without Binyamin? We don't know. Yosef has imprisoned Shimon in the last visit. He took one brother and he took Shimon. We don't know why, but we can assume perhaps that Shimon was high up there in the sale of Yosef, which is a whole other discussion about who actually sells him. Yes?
When you asked the question, I was going back to when he went to Egypt, and then he didn't have power, but when he got to power, even then he also...
That's correct.
Not responding to that.
That's what the Ramban says. The Ramban says the first time he had the power, according to the Ramban, was in the house of Potiphar, already before he becomes viceroy. And, says the Ramban, why is it that given the opportunity to do this, to send some message to his father, we have total silence? And I remember when I first saw this question, I said, wow, this changes the whole scene here. we've got to figure out why Yosef is insisting on this silence. All right, so the problem with the two classical approaches is who appointed you to make things happen. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch has an interesting twist. He says that Yosef is not motivated by the dreams to make them come true, nor is he motivated by the desire to make them do tshuva. Those are issues that hopefully will happen. What he desires is the establishment of a real relationship between himself and the brothers. And he knows that can't happen the way things are. If he were to reveal himself right away, what would the brothers see immediately? We threw him into the pit, right? He will look at them as the people who threw them into the pit. The only way that relationship can be created, says the Rav Hirsch, is if the brothers are in the same situation and react differently, then Yosef can say they're not the people they were before. And they can say about themselves, thank God, we've changed. So that is the driving force, says Hirsch. That's what gives him the right, because he's looking at the family, and he wants the family to be whole. He wants the family to be at peace. And that's why he embarks on these manipulations. All right, so those are the classical approaches. Very, very fascinating approach is suggested by Rav Yoel ben Nun. Turn to page number 2. Rav Yoel ben Nun is a Sioni scholar who is well known within scholars of that community. He says, you've got to, when you look at the Torah, you've got to put yourself in the position of the people that are there, and you have to say, what do they know? What do I know? And are they the same? Says Rav Shimshon, says Yoel ben Nun, Yosef does not know that his father thinks he's dead. Right? All he knows is that he was sold into slavery by the brothers, right? Or someone at the scene. That's a whole discussion. But the point is, he thinks his father must know what happened to him, that he was kidnapped, that he was a hostage, that he's something. Says Rabbi Yoel ben Nun, if it's a 6-day journey from Egypt to Canaan, it's also what? A 6-day journey from Canaan to Egypt. Why hasn't his father put up a poster? Why hasn't his father come and tried to find out where he is? This preys on his mind, says Rabbi Yoel ben Nun, up to the point where he comes to this inescapable conclusion that his father was somehow complicit in what happens. Now, this is powerfully difficult, right? I mean, that Yosef is the cherished son of all the sons, right? Dafka. So Yoel ben Nun suggests a few things. He says it's possible that he thinks that there is a pattern in the family, that there is always one individual who's on the outside, right? Esau, right? Ishmael. Maybe his father is placing him outside because this is something he's supposed to do in that role. Maybe, who knows why? But why hasn't my father contacted me? Right?
Also, he sent them to meet the brothers.
Right, correct. Why would he send him? Right? Perhaps he knew what was going to happen. Perhaps he created the scene, right? He sent him alone to meet the brothers, not just sent him to get the brothers, but sent him alone. Says Rav Yoel ben Nun, if you look at the speech that Yehuda gives, which causes Yosef to reveal himself. So the first thing we said is Yosef sees Yehuda changed. But there's something else that he sees. In that speech, Yehuda says, our brother is lost, and our father thinks, what? He's dead. The minute Yosef hears that, he knows that things are different, right? If he knows, if he thinks I'm dead, that explains why he hasn't tried to contact me. We know that he thinks that, so that, realize what Goldin is saying to us. We know that Yaakov thinks Yosef is dead because we read it in the text. But the people who are there, the brothers who are, Yosef who's there, does not know. He is the only one that does not know in the family, right? He doesn't know whether or not they're looking for him and why they're not looking for him. And the truth that his father thinks he's dead only emerges when Yehuda stands to protect Binyamin. And that is what causes Yosef's revelation to the brothers. Another very prominent Rav in the Tzioni community, Rav Yaakov Medan, it takes the position that is one of the classical approaches we said. He takes the position that he wants the brothers to have the opportunity to do tshuva, and he's creating a situation that will enable them to do that. But I'm going to give you a new approach, all right? An approach that occurred to me many, many years ago. I think that it's hinted at in the text, and I'll show you how. I'd like to suggest that Yosef does not contact his father because he can't. And that the years that he is viceroy in Egypt are actually the most dangerous years of the whole sojourn. All right? Now, what's my proof? Take a look for a minute at Roman numeral number 3 on page 2. Yes, the scene is Yosef is standing in front of the king. And Yosef has offered his interpretation of the dreams. Last session we spoke about why Paro accepts that interpretation, given that there were other interpretations presented. What does Paro do after Yosef presents his interpretation? Vayitav adavar be'enei Paro v'enei kol avodav. Right? This interpretation, this young man, he's good. We see him as good in our view. Vayomer Paro el avodav. Paro turns to his servants and says, "Hanimsa kozeh ish asher ruach Elohim bo." Have you ever met anyone else who has the Spirit of God in him? Now, why is Paro doing this? What's just say, I accept that interpretation and move on. He's doing it because this is a dangerous moment. What he's about to do, in the presence of all his servants and officers, what he's about to do is he's about to leapfrog a Hebrew slave over them and over all of Egypt. And that is something that's extremely dangerous, right? But we have to remember that Paro's palace is a palace of manipulation. The proof of that is what happened with the butler and the baker, right? No, they were accused of trying to poison Paro. So Paro turns to his underlings and he says to them, "You see what I see. You hear what I hear. If there's anyone else who objects to this, speak up now. Other than that, you will be held complicit in all that's about to occur. You were here. You had the I'm giving you the opportunity. I'm giving you the opportunity to object. And if you fail to object, you have yourselves to blame." All right. So that's the first indication that perhaps what is happening is a dangerous event. What is happening is Yosef is being leapfrogged over all of the Egyptian officers to this position of power.
What about the simplistic approach to trying to understand why he doesn't ask? He doesn't want to answer his brothers, which is pretty obvious. He doesn't want to contact. The question is, why doesn't he contact his father?
Right, that's the question.
Maybe because he sees his father as complicit.
Well, that's what Yoel ben Nun says, right?
Right, he sees his father as complicit in getting
That-
him into trouble. And
That's what Yoel ben Nun
that's the
suggests
only one that makes some
to you
actual
so
sense.
far. So far. All right. All right. I hear you. All right. Keep going. All right. Yes.
What has occurred to me over the years is because Yosef's position is precarious, he's an outsider, he didn't want to be seen by the court as reaching out to his old roots because they may think he's more loyal to them than to him.
I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. Listen, did you hear that? Excellent, excellent possibility. In fact, it's going to come out in the discussion. We'll see in a moment. All right, so now we go to the next scene that we're looking at, the next hint in the Torah. Yes, I'm sorry.
The language that Paro uses, is there anyone with whom the Spirit of God is?
It's amazing.
So unusual
Right,
for a Paro
right.
that what do we make of that? As a matter of fact, doesn't he make of himself a God?
What we make of that is that Yosef, we said last time we met, injects God into all of the events that occur. So what we're seeing is that Paro is moved by that, and in that one instant is willing to say he has his God and his God is helping him. So that's how the Chazal see it. They see it as Yosef's successful introduction of God into the palace of Paro. All right, but absolutely, it's very unusual. It's very unusual. Turn now to the scene at the banquet hall, right? When the brothers come back and they're afraid they're going to be thrown into jail, and what happens instead? The banquet. This is the first example, I think, in the Torah of assigned seating. All right? Take a look. Vayasimu lo levado, v'lohem levadam. They gave to Yosef a place alone, and to the Egyptians a place for them. V'lemitrim ito levadam, ki lo yochlu, and him levadam, and the Israelites, the Hebrews, by themselves. Ki lo yuchluna mitzrim, lechol es ha'ivrim lechem, ki toava hi lemitzrayim. It's an abomination for Egyptians to eat with Hebrews. So what am I going to do? I'm going to set a place for the Hebrews. But who else do I have to set a place for? Yosef. The text is telling us they don't want to sit with Yosef. Right? He has his own isolated place. They are not willing to sit with him, and they won't sit with the brothers. So once again, he's alone and in a palace of intrigue. A palace of intrigue. That's what we have to remember. Turn to the next. And here we're going to come to your suggestion. V'hakol nishma beis paro lemar. Ba'u achei Yosef vayitavad be'enei paro uve'enei avodav. Yosef reveals himself to the brothers. It's an amazing event. People see it, witness it. Somehow the news gets back to Paro that Yosef's brothers have come down to Egypt. And vayitavad. What is this, a soap opera? No, Paro is happy that Yosef's brothers have come back, come to him. Why is Paro in any way reacting to this? What? Say again? What do you mean profit for what way? Okay, good. All right. So his brothers may have the same opportunity to do so. Okay.
He wasn't a slave. He's from a Kosheva family.
Excellent. Excellent. Come back to you. All right. We'll come back to you. Anybody else? We've heard two reasons suggested here. One, that they now know that he's not a Hebrew slave. They now know that he comes from a royal family of Israelites. Also, so that's one explanation. That explanation is the Ramban, if I remember correctly. The Sforno suggests what you suggested, which is they always thought he had dual loyalty. As long as his family was still in Canaan, part of him is still there. But if now we get all the brothers to come down, then he will only have loyalty to Egypt, and we won't have this issue with him that he's really dreaming of going somewhere else. Now, think of both of these and recognize how much of what we're hearing is so relevant to us in terms of how outsiders view us, right? In other words, dual loyalty, the Jews, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Identity.
What? Identity, right. Correct. All right, so that's that. But the real indication that Yosef is facing very difficult times and very difficult role can be found when the issue of Yaakov's burial comes about. Now, we're going to see a few sources of this. Take a look at the third source on page number 3. Excuse me for a moment. I just need to... Third paragraph. ויקרבו ימי ישראל לעמוס, ויקרא לבנו ליוסף, ויאמר לו, אם לא מצאתי חן, שים ידך תחת ירכי, ועשית עמדי חסד ואמס, אל נא תקברני במצרים. Yaakov turns to Yosef. I want you to do chesed and emes. What we have today is we call it chesed shel emes, right? Which is taking care of someone who's passed away. Yaakov says, I'm getting close to leaving. Don't bury me here. And v'shochavti im avosai, v'nosasi mimitzrayim, ukvartani b'kivrosam, vayomer anochi esek dvarecha. So Yosef, he's asking Yosef individually, partially, I think, because he recognizes that the only one of the brothers who's going to be able to do this will be Yosef, right? So, and Yosef agrees. But then he does something strange. Vayomer hi shavali. Swear to me, Yosef, that you're going to do this. Now, wait a minute. Again, Yosef is the beloved son, the favorite. Do I think that he's going to say I'll do it and not do it? What does he have to make him swear for? So we'll take a look at that in a moment. Turn to the next page. I got it. The brothers are all now around Yaakov's bed. He says to them, I'm going to be gathered to my nation, I'm going to die. And he offers a whole series of reasons as to what he's asking them, right? Kivru iti el osi el avosai. Bury me with my fathers. Right? El ha'ma'orah asher b'stei Ephron achiti. In the cave that is, what's the cave? Baras HaMachpelah, right? Which is in and so clearly the legacy of Avraham and the knowledge of Avraham's accomplishments has made it down to further generations in the family, right? In the cave, in where it is, right? Asher kono Avraham hasadam Ephron achiti lachuzas kaver. That I want you to bury me in the plot that was purchased by my grandfather, and I want you to bury, and where are buried other members of our family and our antecedents. And please, right? I'm pointing all of you that this is what you should do. So the question is, why does he do it first to Yosef alone and then to the brothers together? I think, just suggesting, he feels that, as they said, Yosef is the only one who has the ability to perhaps do this. And secondly, he then wants the brothers not to argue with Yosef about it, right? So in other words, he's appointing Yosef to get it done, and then he's bringing the brothers into the system to show that this is what he wants. It's not Yosef's own idea.
One thought is that he made Yosef swear because Yosef must really want him to be buried with his wife.
Mhm.
So even though he said, "Yeah, I'll bury you where the other boat," he's really thinking of emote.
Okay, it's possible. It's possible. Again, I find it difficult to think that he really suspects Yosef of not, that Yosef won't carry out what he did. But you're correct. Yosef may want him to be buried in Egypt. So he says, "I want you to swear." I mean, buried in Israel. Yosef may want him to be buried in Egypt. Right? No, he is suggesting Yosef may want. I'm sorry. Oh, Yosef wants to be in Marasav Machpelah too?
He wants to marry Yaakov with Rachel.
All right, he wants to find Rachel's kever, which is a debated kever to this day. And okay, all right, that's an interesting idea. That's a very interesting idea. And it explains something that happens in the conversations that take place between Yaakov and Yosef and Yaakov and the brothers, where he injects at some point, he says, I had to bury Rachel. And so that's very good. But, yeah.
You know, the famine had stopped when Yaakov entered Mitzrayim. So the Egyptians were enamored of Yaakov. And Yosef, we know this from the Meforshim, was Yaakov was very afraid that they would make a god of him if he was buried and use his shrine. You know, say it was a shrine. So Yaakov was afraid that Yosef, who was really under the influence of Paro, considered him as a son.
Right.
There was a conflict of fathers with Yaakov.
So in other words, he doesn't know how much Yosef has become an Egyptian.
Paro's the one who gave him a new name and gave him a wife. So Yosef was really indebted, and I think Yaakov was also afraid that Yosef could be influenced by pressure from Paro.
Okay.
Therefore, he made him swear.
Okay.
And therefore, he said that under no circumstances to both Yosef and the brothers, I don't want them to make a god of me,
Right.
get me out of here. I only want to be buried.
Okay.
with my sister.
Good, right. And the possibility is that he thinks that Yosef has taken on some of the Egyptian culture. That also ties into something else. Again, it's amazing how these suggestions are tying in. You're doing great, group, all right? So the idea is the following. When he sees Ephraim and Manasseh, Yaakov, the Torah says that, first he says, your children, Ephraim, he's speaking to Yosef, your children are going to be like my children, they're going to become shvatim, they're going to become tribes, they're going to be part of the national structure. But then the Torah says that he lifts his eyes, he sees Ephraim and Manasseh, and he turns to Yosef and says, "Who's that?" All right. Now, and then the Torah says he has trouble seeing, but it doesn't say he has trouble seeing before the who's that. So in other words, it wasn't the trouble seeing that created the issue. What was the issue? He sees two Egyptian kids, right? And Yosef actually answers him by saying, "These are the kids, the children that God has given to me here." Right. So in other words, what he's saying to Yaakov is, they're okay. They're part of us. They're going to be all right. They will keep the faith. And the fact that you don't recognize them, that's normal, because they have lived in Egypt the whole time. I just want to say one thing. I think I've told you before. It's flipping it to us. Mesorah is often described as receiving from one generation and giving to the next. Right? That's an incomplete definition. Mesorah, heritage, is given to us from one generation. It flows through us. We add change, shape, right? Cholent is not in the Torah. Right? Gefilte fish. I'm thinking of food because we just came from Torah Shabbat. Torah Shabbat. Right? Very good. All right. So the point is that every generation makes its contributions to the Masorah before handing it down. Every family does. Every individual does. So what we're seeing here is now they are going to be in Egypt. They're going to be somewhat Egyptian. That's going to happen, and there's going to be a struggle. What can we accept and what can't we accept? And that will lead into the next events where they become slaves. Yes.
I'm just wondering, what's the significance of Pasuk Lamed Bet?
Okay.
It seems to be out of position. It should be before Lamed Aleph.
All right, let me see. Lamed Bet. Yeah, all right. So I understand what you're saying. Lamed Bet should come after Lamed, right? Now, whether he's talking about the Meorah. I think it's sensible for it to be here as well, because what he's doing is he's piling on reasons for doing this. So one of the reasons is that this Sadeh was purchased by Avram. Another reason is their sorrow buried, etc., etc. So he deals with the first reason and deals with the purchase of Marat HaMachpelah, and then he deals with the next reason. Now they're buried there. That's also why I want to be there. That's what I would suggest. Yeah.
What is the practical translation of Simna Yadcha Tachat Yerechi?
Apparently, it was a thing that you placed your hand on.
No, that's the literal, but what is the practical translation? Is it an oath?
It's an oath. That's right.
Why does he swear twice?
Where does he swear twice?
When he tells him swear to
Yeah, right. Correct. I don't know why I didn't. Just taking a look.
Yes, say what you.
Hishava lo, right?
That's the second time.
When the first one is,
Simna Yadcha Tachat Yerechi.
right? So that sentence is asking him to do it. He hasn't done it yet.
But then he asks him again, he shavali.
Right? Correct. He's saying, put your hand under my thigh. I want you to swear. I'm making this a real, and now swear it. Now swear it. In other words, it's not two separate. It's the fulfillment of what he is indicating in the previous section. Right? Okay. So now, wait. Yeah.
I want to go back to the idea of Egyptian concerns with dual loyalty.
Right.
As being possibly a reason why Yosef was asked to swear.
Right.
Because his father may have felt that the Egyptians would pressure him and say, what, you got to go back there? You're
Right.
Egyptian
Well-
now. And if Yosef can say, well, I swore to my
All right.
father,
Good. Good. We're going to hit it. We're going to hit it. Yes.
All of these explanations by the commentaries explain why Yosef didn't do it.
Didn't.
But
Yeah.
what I don't hear is any statement saying that he made a mistake because children should be explaining things to their parents and giving them significant information instead of hiding it. And so that it was a problem, whatever the reason.
Well, that's the impetus for the question.
That's, but
They're not, but
they're not saying it explicitly.
it's the impetus for the question. In other words, why doesn't Yosef contact his father? Because the Ramban said it would be appropriate because of the kavod of his father to make a year journey to see him.
But then they find a reason why.
But what they're doing, though, is they're trying to see why, if that's true, Yosef behaves the way he does. Your explanation is,
He made a mistake.
was he made a mistake? They don't necessarily think it's a mistake. Okay.
Because, given his power and given where he was, and given the fact that the Egyptians knew that he was coming from a different country and was captured and imprisoned, etc., they didn't think he was like some person who had no problems and no issues. So if he had said, I have a father living in Pachut, and I'm going to contact him, they probably would say, okay, go ahead.
I don't think so. All right, we'll get to that. But we have to, let me continue and then take the comments afterwards, all right? Hold on. Take a look now at Yosef's interchange with Paro. Turn to page 4, the bottom of the page. Vayavru yemei bechiso. Yaakov dies, and all of Egypt mourns. Right, as you said, they think he's a god. They think he's an unusual person. Vayidaber Yosef el beis Paro, lemor imna matzasi chen beinechem, dabru no be'aznei Paro lemor. Yosef speaks to the house of Paro and says, if I have found favor in your eyes, please go to Paro and tell him this. What does that tell you? That he can't go himself, right? That as what we would have thought, right? His viceroy, the one that he's treating as a son, the one that he would, all he would have to do is knock on the door and say, Paro, I need to talk to you. No, he has to go. And by the way, I believe that what he's doing is scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. In other words, what I think he's saying is, you do this for me and I'll owe you. And you'll get paid back at some point along the way. That's probably a hidden issue here, all right? But it's clear that he can't go to Paro alone.
It's no Esther.
What? He's not Esther. Right, correct. Well said. So now take a look, and you suggested that the Shvuah was perhaps necessary for the king to hear about. Take a look at the next line. Avi hishbiani lemor. Yosef is choosing his words very carefully. My father made me swear. Now, you said that Paro might see that as an important piece of information. Think even more, how much more so when you recognize Egypt. How does Egypt feel about people that have passed away? What do? They build pyramids, they afterlife. Saying that my father who passed away and is now no longer with us made me swear, Paro cannot break that. Cannot break that, because he believes that it'll come back to haunt him if he does so. Keep going. What Avi ishbiani lemor. My father made me swear, saying, and look at the next underlined line. I'm going to die. Bekivri asher korisi li be'eretz Canaan shama tikbareni. My father made me swear that I would bury him in the grave that he dug for himself, right? In the Canaan. Now, stop for a minute. He changed the whole story, right? I mean, what did Yaakov say to the brothers and to Yosef? Bury me with my relatives, bury me with the family. Yosef knows that if he goes and he tells any of that to Paro, he's a dead duck, right? In other words, you can't, what, Mitzrayim isn't good enough for you? You have to go back there?
He's buying into Paro's viewpoint. Egyptian royalty builds tombs for them.
Right.
Themselves. If he can establish
Good point.
of Yaakov building it.
Excellent.
It's a whole different story.
Excellent idea.
Like the Egyptians.
Okay, excellent idea. That I didn't even think of that. That the monarchs built their own pyramids, right? In other words, this were their resting place. So when he says, in the grave that I dug, Yaakov says, in the grave that I dug, it's an additional reason to do it. Now let me please go and bury my father. Ve'ashuva. What does he say? I'll come back. Right? In other words, that's a concern, right? It's a concern that Yosef may take advantage of this exit from Egypt and run away or do whatever he wants. And he says, Ashuva. So Paro says, Alei ukfor of Soficho ka'asher hishpiacho. The Torah is very clear here, right? Paro says, I have to recognize that shvuah. I go bury your father as he made you swear, right? And sure enough, Vayal Yosef likporis aviv, right? Yosef goes to bury his father. Vayalo ito kol avdei paro, ziknei beso, v'kol ziknei eretz Mitzrayim. And who went with him? All of Paro's servants, right? All of the ziknei beso, all of the elders in his home, in Paro's home, and all of the elders of Egypt are going now with Yosef. Why? Make sure he comes back, right? Good. In other words, I'm going to let him go. What?
It's an awful lot of
An awful lot of people. Awful lot of people. And the Torah tells us that people that makes an impression on the people of the area. They say this is Evel Mitzrayim. This is a place where mourning Egyptians mourned, or Egyptians. So Yosef has to be very, very careful when he makes this is probably the most dangerous moment of all. And only because he swore and had these arguments that would ring in Paro's ear, could he turn to others and ask them to go to the king on his behalf. So now let's take a look at what all of these hints in the text are telling us. The hints in the text, he sat alone at the banquet, right? The hint in the text that it was pleasing to Paro and the brother and his servants that the brothers have come back. The explanation that it was an issue of dual loyalty or an issue of that he didn't come from an honored family. What you see is, I think, that Yosef could not. He didn't have anybody to trust. What would he do? Imagine, he'd go to one of the servants and say to him, I want you to go to my father and bring him this message. What would the servant do as soon as he leaves the house? Go to Paro, right? Go to Paro and say, Paro, you know what he's doing? Or whatever it is. There is no one that Yosef can trust. And therefore he does not send a note to his father because he can't. It's a suggestion, in addition to all the other suggestions that were made. And it underscores for us that we shouldn't feel that the Yosef story or understand Yosef's story as a fairy tale. We shouldn't assume, Yosef becomes viceroy and Yosef is still Yosef. And Yosef, the sad truth about Yosef is that he's always alone. He's always isolated. He's isolated from his brothers, right? Isolated from the Egyptians. And the brothers, by the way, are concerned. After Yaakov dies, they go to Yosef and say, please don't take it out. Even though Yosef has said that God made me come here, don't worry, etc., the brothers are still frightened. And what's also fascinating is that he gets a reward for being Yosef by his two sons being Shvatim, but that means that what's not going to be named Yosef is not going to be part of the shit, right? Once again, Yosef is outside.
It's the same Galatria as Sion. We should learn from him. He's always the prime example of non-assimilation. That's why he's associated with Hanukkah. So Yosef and Sion, if we're going to stay true to ourselves, we can't listen to the U.S., we can't listen to
Right.
We have to
Right. Right. You're going where I wanted to take us, which is that understand the truths that emerge from stories in the Torah and recognize their relevance to our own situation today. And over and over again, you'll see that the stories that are in the Torah are not just stories, but they are the reality. Yes?
You answered why as viceroy he couldn't send the message to Solomon. He started with why from Potiphar. Right away couldn't he try to...
I think again, we have to understand that though he was pushed by Potiphar to become the one responsible for all the things in the household, nonetheless, he's still a slave. And who is he going to get to do this? And how do I know that who I get to do it isn't going to just turn around and go to Potiphar and say, do you know what Yosef is doing? It's the same thing. It's just increased when he becomes the viceroy.
There's another perspective of the sensitivity that Yosef had, because he had no idea what his father's position was in the Yosef story, so to speak. He was also concerned with shalom bias in the family. I mean, what happens if, picture this, he sends a message home, tells his father, Yaakov, that the other sons sold the son into slavery. What's that going to do to the unity of the family?
So what you're saying, which is a good suggestion, what you're saying is that one of the other reasons that Yosef goes through all of the machinations that he goes through is because he can't reveal until after the brothers have shown themselves to be different.